welcome on into the show. This one's going to be a little bit different, but going to be pretty cool. If it's your first time here, please give it a thumbs up and a subscribe. From Comics Explained, Robert Jefferson. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. What's going on?
Hey, enjoying life, chatting with you. That doesn't get much better than that. How's your morning going so far?
It's going pretty good. I've actually got breakfast sitting over here. I partially ate it before I started the Zoom call, so I'm going to eat the rest when I'm done.
Man, I'm interrupting breakfast. You're giving us some of your breakfast time. We appreciate you checking in with us. So, Comics Explained, let's go ahead and dive right into it. I think that a lot of my viewers would be interested to hear your take. We just spoke with Ray Porter about 2 weeks ago and got his reaction to the new Justice League trailer that had come out. And your take on it, why was there such a push to get the Snyder Cut, the new version of this movie?
I mean, it's curiosity, right? Like you're talking about a movie that was supposed to have been done by Zack Snyder, right? People were expecting that. They were expecting something akin to probably The Man of Steel or something along those lines. And then halfway through, it ended, right? And so you've already got a pretty significant fan base for Zack Snyder that I'm aware of. I haven't really looked too deep into how big his fan base is, but given everything we've seen with regards to the Snyder Cut, it's there, right? And I think people just want to see how the movie was supposed to be. And I think a lot of that's based on the fact that when you go and you watch the Justice League film, it's not bad, but you kind of walk out like, okay, so like that was a movie that I saw. Like I did a thing for 2.5 hours, you know, and people want to know like what would Zack Snyder's vision have been like? Would it have been better? Would it have been worse? Right? And I think that with a lot of people looking at Zack Snyder as almost kind of like a mini Michael Bay, I think a lot of folks out there are kind of like, it would have been worse, but there's no real way to know until the movie drops. And I think that's why a lot of people, while it started off with probably a hardcore fan base, it started to turn into like, I'm curious what that movie would look like. And I think that's really how it kind of picked up steam.
I think that for viewers that may be coming from the Marvel Extended Universe that are now coming into DC, may be a little bit confused as to what the hell is happening with Batman and how many people are portraying that character. Can you try and shed a little light on what might be the process of what they're thinking here?
Man, that's... They're not. That was always kind of my thought process. No, but in reality, I think that the biggest issue that faced Warner Brothers when they said they wanted to create their own comic book cinematic universe is I think they wanted the MCU without all the work that went into planning the MCU. And so they were like, let's just start creating films based on characters. And I think a lot of that probably came out of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, which I still say to this day is probably one of the greatest superhero trilogies ever created, right? And I'm including the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that list. But I think a lot of it was based on, hey, like there's popularity here. There's a thing here, right? Like we've got the original superheroes, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all that kind of stuff. Let's do that too. And I think it was more of let's just throw movies out there and see what happens, as opposed to the entire process being planned, right? Because if you go and you look at interviews with Feige and you look at interviews with Avi Arad and you talk to all these guys, the idea was that there was the Iron Man movie that was launched first. And then it was like, okay, this movie proved to be successful. Now let's plan. Right, because when you look at the MCU, right, it was a $500 million loan from Merrill Lynch. It was a shot in the dark, and it was the hope that it would work. And if it didn't, then Marvel would have been worse off after that than they were before they went into the whole movie project. And so, it was kind of like, let's make Iron Man and see what happens. If it doesn't work, whatever. If it does work, then we've got something great on our hands. And because it succeeded, then they started planning it out. I think with Warner Brothers, it was, we want all that stuff. We want the glitz and glamour. We want all, the multi-billion-dollar movie franchise, all that kind of stuff. But like, we just want to put stuff out there. And I think the issue they ran into was you had a whole bunch of movies that had nothing to do with each other, or they seemed to have something to do with each other. We don't really know. They had totally different tones, which really isn't the worst thing, given the nature of their characters and how different that they are. But it just seemed like a disheveled mess. And so the result of that is that, as I understand it, for the people who are watching this and don't really know what's going on with the Warner Brothers movies, as I understand it, they've moved away from the entire shared universe. So they're not looking to do what the MCU is doing. Instead, what they're looking to do is create movies where each one is in its own universe. But in my mind, that doesn't work because people have come to expect a shared universe, right? They see a whole bunch of superheroes. They expect to see like all these different superheroes teaming up, right? So you see Joaquin Phoenix's Joker film, and it's like, okay, so when do we see him face off against like the Justice League, right? So like, when are we going to see an appearance from like Gal Gadot, or like Henry Cavill or something like that? That's the expectation, and not getting that and saying each one of these movies is in its own universe is confusing to people. It throws people off, and so I think that's where people are at right now, in terms of all the confusion and the mess and everything that's going on. But Yeah, it's kind of wild, man.
He is Rob Jefferson from Comics Explained. You've had so much success on your YouTube channel. I'm talking about millions and millions of views. And I want to get to that in just a minute. But before we do, one last question about the new Snyder Cut that just came out, because we just saw Darkseid for the first time in the teaser trailer that came out. What did you think about what your first impression was about him? And then, how does Darkseid compare with Thanos? Because there's so many comparisons that people make between the two. Is there a comparison to be made there?
I mean, there definitely is, right? But the difference that you're talking about here is Thanos is one of the, or I'm sorry, not Thanos. Darkseid is one of those characters who's almost like a metatextual character, right? If that makes any sense. And to kind of explain that, the idea is in DC Comics, you have the entire multiverse. Right, every universe that could possibly exist. There's only really 52 that we know of, which is why DC has like the new 52 line of comics. It's why if you go and start reading DC Comics in some kind of detail, you'll hear about 52 universes, because there's only 52 that have been discovered. Right, there's just there's an infinite number of other ones that are out there. But despite everything in the multiverse, there's only one Darkseid throughout the entirety of the multiverse. Right, so imagine that Thanos was hopping and skipping around the multiverse looking for like Infinity Stones or something like that. Right, like he entered one universe, wiped out half the life in that universe, and then went to another universe and did the same thing. That's what you'd be talking about. So in terms of grand scale with regards to power, capabilities, things like that, I always saw Darkseid as a far more powerful version of Thanos. But that's a battle that's been raging in comic books for decades. When I say decades, I mean since the introduction of Darkseid in the 1970s, the introduction of Thanos not long after that, right? It's just been a thing that's been going on and on and on and on and on. And people just are always debating this question, like who's stronger, who's more powerful, who could win. It never ends, right? So in terms of the role they play in their respective comic book publishing landscapes, DC, Marvel, Darkseid's on a much grander scale. Right. But in terms of the power they possess, it's a toss-up. We really haven't seen an instance where the two of them have actually fought within the realm of comic books for any real measure of time to know if, which one of them is the most powerful. So.
He is Rob Jefferson from Comics Explained. So let's go ahead and get into the YouTube channel, because for many people, you're living what the dream is. You're making movies about comics on YouTube, and just diving into your passion. When did that start? What originally got you into it? And then when did you first notice that you were really picking up some traction?
I mean, here's the thing, like I've been reading comics for like 25 years, right? Almost 26 at this point, right? I got into comics with X-Men, the animated series, and it was kind of a shared experience, right? I had like this show and I was curious, like what more is there besides this? And then my dad turned me on to, or at least he tried to get me into DC Comics. I didn't like it. I was like, I don't like DC. I like X-Men comics. So I started reading, more X-Men stuff. But yeah, from there, it was a passion that I always had. And then I was at a job that I wasn't in the happiest place. And I kind of wanted to get out of there. And at the same time, being a fan of YouTube and watching other YouTubers grow, it was just kind of like, I want to do that. Right? Like, I want to make YouTube videos for a living. And so I took 2 weeks off work and just kind of as a shot, I just made a handful of videos that were explaining comic books to people, right? Because the entire basis behind Comics Explained is if you give me 30 minutes, I'll make you a comic book expert. And there wasn't really anybody on YouTube doing that at the time, right? It was more or less people just kind of sitting in their chairs and saying, this is why the newest issue of Batman is so great. And there were a handful of other comic book YouTubers who were huge at the time, right? But they weren't really taking a character like Captain America and in the span of 30 minutes saying, here's everything you need to know so that when you go to the movie theater and you watch Captain America, the First Avenger, or the Winter Soldier, or Civil War, and people are having these conversations where they're talking about how like Ed Brubaker brought back Bucky Barnes, and they're talking about, the Rick Remender run where he loses the super soldier serum, like you'll know exactly what they're referencing. And you can be a part of that conversation as opposed to kind of sitting there like, man, I wish I knew what they were talking about and feeling left out. And so it was actually a buddy of mine who came up with the idea of putting panels in there that were dynamic that showed people what I was talking about. And really, it wasn't until Scarlet Witch, the video that I made explaining Scarlet Witch, that it all blew up. And it just happened to time it at the right way. It was that, and it was the original Civil War event that I covered. But it all kind of came to a head perfectly, right? The announcement of Scarlet Witch kind of coincided with when I made that video. And so people were out there looking for information about Scarlet Witch. And then here they come across YouTube, and here's a 26-minute long video that'll make you an expert on the character, teach you everything that you need to know. And that set it off. And then it went into the announcement of Captain America 3 Civil War. And that announcement came just as I was finishing covering the Civil War story. And so it was kismet, right? It was all just kind of happening at the right time, you know, and it all just kind of blew up. So it was being in a spot on YouTube where there weren't a whole lot of people doing what I was doing, or really not anybody doing what I was doing, combined with just kind of finishing or releasing videos at the right time. And it just sort of worked.
And like that's such an amazing story and inspiring to a lot of people that want to, you know, try to begin to make the push on YouTube. So congratulations on all the success that you've had with the YouTube channel. When you look back and you think about the videos that you've made, are there any that stand out that you think of, wow, there were a lot of challenges with that video that I had to overcome, or are they pretty much all just smooth sailing as you get into them?
No, probably one of the most complicated ones was when I did a video on the history of the Marvel Universe. I took the entirety of Marvel Comics, and Marvel actually released a comic book more recently that was called A History of the Marvel Universe. Before they did that, I basically broke down the entire history of Marvel Comics, right? So as far back as we know, going all the way to when Galactus originated in the universe before the current one, running through, you know, what we knew about that universe and then covering everything that happened in the universe, right? So like the origin of mutants and the origin of Thanos and the various races that exist out there, and the elders of the universe, like the Collector. You know, most people probably recognize him from Guardians of the Galaxy. He was played by Benicio del Toro. The Grandmaster, who was played by Jeff Goldblum, and Thor Ragnarok. You know, like as far as we know, the origins of that, and just kind of creating this comprehensive timeline on how everything came into existence. That was super difficult because it was a lot of research, but it was also trying to do it in a way to where I wasn't saying, okay, this happens, you know, like Celestials come to Earth and they modify human genes and they give us Eternals, Deviants, and Mutants, like 30,000 years ago. Like covering that and then saying, but like 1,000,000 years ago, this happened. Like trying not to jump all over the place with regards to following this timeline, trying to do it in a linear fashion. That was wildly difficult because I would write a script out, I would have it all sorted, I would be unsure about a piece of information, or I would double check my research, only to find out that I missed something. So I'd have to either throw that in or just rewrite the whole thing, right? So it took me a while to do it. It might be that I write a script over the course of a week, and then over the course of the next 3 weeks, I'm correcting it, right? So that was probably the most difficult series that I think I've done. It was amazing and I loved it, you know, but it was difficult. It was pretty tough.
All right, final question about the comics and the YouTube page. So real quickly, on Netflix today, Warrior Nun just released, which is based on another graphic novel. We had obviously the release of the Snyder Cut based on the Justice League. What shows do you think could be created next out of a comic book that we haven't seen yet? Like, what would you like to see?
There's so many. My number one pick would be East of West by Jonathan Hickman. Jonathan Hickman is far and away my favorite comic book writer. Right? If anybody out there, you know, like watching this, if you're curious, like if you ever sat down and said, I wonder what the best Avengers story is of all time, it's Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers. It's long, but it's amazing. Right? It's a story about Black Panther. Like it's in that story that Black Panther becomes the king of the dead, where the multiverse ends. Right? You have like the Beyonders, the Molecule Man. You have all kinds of crazy stuff. The Infinity Stones get destroyed. It's an amazing story. But he does the slow burn, and so because of that, I love the work that he does. His story, East of West, is basically kind of like an apocalyptic story, and it's the idea that like the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? So pestilence, war, death, and famine all come back, but death comes back before everybody else, and so you've got pestilence, war, and famine who were hunting for death, trying to find out what's going on. It's an amazing story, right? It's probably one of the best stories that I've read in a long, long time. There is Scott Snyder is a comic book writer. There's his story called Witches. There's, you know, it's one of these things. Well, I won't spoil too much, but it's a great horror comic. It's a great scary comic. And I think they're actually turning it into a series on Amazon. But there is Invincible, and I want to say it's Mark Waid who wrote that. It's a father and son superhero team, and then things get dark pretty fast. It's an amazing story, right? So I think that in the future, what you're going to see with regards to TV shows that are coming out is I think you're going to see people kind of breaking away from like the Marvel, the DC standard, right? Which is like the great, big, huge names. And I think this is really the time where, you know, creator-owned independent comic books really begin to shine, because as great as Marvel and DC are, I mean, I can point you to a number of independent comic books that are better, right? Like Why the Last Man, or like Something's Killing the Children, or something like that. These independent comics that are just absolutely mind blowing, right? Spawn is another really good example. So I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see, a lot of comic book stories coming out there based on independent creator work that don't really have anything to do with Marvel and DC. And I think people are going to love what they see, if I'm being honest.
All right, as we begin to wind down the interview, our final 5 questions are always right about you and where you are right now. So the first question, who do you speak with the most right now?
Who do I speak with the most? My fiance.
Oh, congratulations.
So yeah, I appreciate it.
How is engaged life treating you?
It's treating me good. It's certainly, it's certainly waking me up to aspects of my life that I wasn't aware of before. But it's good. It's good.
Yeah. All right. So what item other than your phone do you use every day?
What would that be? My laptop. Yeah, my laptop. I'm on this thing. Either I'm editing photos or doing research or something. So yeah, definitely my laptop.
When did you first get into comic books?
Probably around 11 or 12 years old.
Where is your dream vacation?
I'd say Rome, Thailand, or maybe Indonesia.
All cities that have not been destroyed in comic book movies just yet.
Yeah, just yet. Yeah, that's why they're safe places to go to.
And finally, how do you define success?
Ooh. Probably the unwillingness to quit. Yeah, I would say that.
Definitely a great way.
Yeah, there were a lot of times when I considered giving, because YouTube can be stressful, and there's a lot of times when my channel wasn't going the way that I wanted to, or things weren't going the way that I wanted them to, and I wanted to quit. But I would say, and I know it sounds cliche to say keep on keeping on, but I would say that's how I would define success, right? Just the unwillingness to give up.
Well, Rob, we appreciate you giving us some of your time here today. Before we let you go, I do want to give you the platform real quick to just give that 20-second elevator pitch on sending people the last step over to Comics Explained. How would you tell them to get over there?
I mean, I would say that if you are a fan of comic book movies, right? If you're curious about what's going on in DC and what you want is to become a comic book expert in 30 minutes or less on your lunch break, I can do that for you. My channel will give you that. It will make you an expert on your lunch break. That's probably even a better pitch, right? Like I can make you a comic book expert on your lunch break. That's what it is, right? On Twitter, I interact and talk with you guys all the time. Try to get to know you guys as best I can. On Instagram, we just kind of post up funny comic book stories or little interesting facts and tidbits, things that I don't get a chance to cover on my channel. But the overall gist of Comics Explained is to make you an expert. That's the whole purpose, is to take people who have never read comics at any point in their life and to give you a character or a team and to make you an expert on on that character or that team. So if that's what you like, if that's what you're digging, then my YouTube channel's for you. So
Rob Jefferson from Comics Explained, thank you so much. It's been a privilege to sit here and spend a little bit of your time with you today. We look forward to potentially cross and pass with you again in the future, I'm sure. Do you make your way to the Comic Cons and those separate conventions? Do you like to go to them?
Oh yeah, I mean, everything being locked down makes it difficult, but as soon as it reopens and as soon as those doors are open, like I'm booking up comic book conventions. I've been dying to get back into the con scene. So yeah, I do.
So keep an eye out and head out there and find yourself Rob Jefferson, grab a picture with him and talk comics. Thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah, definitely.